She sat quietly at the edge of the bed while the house finally became silent. The dishes were washed, the lights in the hallway were dim, and everyone else had already fallen asleep. For the first time all day, she had a moment to breathe. He walked into the room thinking she wanted affection the way she used to when they were younger. He moved closer, touched her shoulder gently, and smiled, but she barely reacted. Not because she didn't love him anymore. Not because she didn't miss closeness. The truth was deeper than that. She was emotionally exhausted. Most men never notice the moment a woman begins to disappear emotionally. It doesn't happen loudly. There's no dramatic announcement. It happens slowly in the middle of everyday life. It happens when she keeps swallowing her feelings because every conversation turns into an argument. It happens when she carries the emotional weight of the relationship while pretending she's okay. It happens when she stops talking about what hurts because she realizes nobody is truly listening. By the time a woman reaches her 40s, life has already taught her painful lessons about love. She has loved people who misunderstood her. She has forgiven things she never deserved. She has stayed strong through heartbreak, disappointment, betrayal, and loneliness while smiling in front of everyone else. And after years of giving pieces of herself away, what she craves most is not passion first. It's peace, emotional peace. That night she looked at him and quietly asked, "Do you even know what's been hurting me lately?" He froze because he didn't have an answer. Not a real one. He knew what she cooked for dinner, what shows she watched, and what time she woke up every morning. But he didn't know the sadness she carried in silence. He didn't know how alone she had started feeling beside the man she loved. That's the part many men miss. Women over 40 are not searching for someone to simply touch their bodies. They want someone to reach the places inside them that life damaged. They want emotional safety. They want to feel emotionally held, not just physically desired. A woman who has experienced enough pain doesn't open her heart because of charm anymore. She opens it when she feels safe enough to stop pretending she's strong all the time. He sat beside her, and for once, instead of defending himself, he listened. Really listened. She told him how invisible she had felt lately. How every time she tried to express emotions, he either became distant or tried to fix everything instead of understanding her. She admitted there were nights she cried quietly in the bathroom because she missed feeling emotionally connected to him. Not romantically, emotionally. And something changed in that moment. Not because he suddenly became perfect, but because he finally understood that intimacy begins long before physical touch. It begins in the way you speak to someone, the way you notice their silence, the way you ask, "Are you okay?" and actually stay long enough to hear the truth. Many women spend years feeling emotionally abandoned in relationships that still look normal from the outside. They continue showing up, taking care of everyone, carrying responsibilities, smiling in public, while slowly feeling emptier inside. And eventually they stop asking for love out loud because disappointment teaches people to become quiet. But deep inside, they still want connection. They still want someone who notices when their energy changes, someone who remembers the little details, someone who touches their soul before touching their skin. As she spoke that night, years of unspoken emotions poured out of her. She wasn't angry anymore. She was tired. Tired of feeling emotionally unseen. Tired of being the strong one all the time. Tired of pretending she didn't need reassurance too. And for the first time in years, he didn't interrupt her pain with explanations. He simply held her hand and listened. Really listen. Sometimes healing in a relationship doesn't begin with grand romantic gestures. Sometimes it begins with emotional presence, with eye contact, with patience, with finally making someone feel heard after years of emotional loneliness. That night didn't magically erase every wound between them, but it became the beginning of something honest. He started paying attention to her emotions instead of only reacting to her words. He noticed when she became quiet. He learned that love is not proven in big moments alone, it's proven in consistency, gentleness, and emotional awareness. And she slowly started returning to herself again. That's what many people misunderstand about women over 40. They are not hard to love. They are simply no longer impressed by shallow attention. Life has taught them the difference between being wanted and being valued. They know the pain of giving everything to someone who only noticed them physically while ignoring them emotionally. A mature woman wants connection that feels safe, She wants a love where she doesn't have to beg for emotional attention. She wants someone who understands that her heart carries memories nobody can see. Because after a certain age, the deepest form of intimacy is not physical at all. It's finally feeling emotionally safe in the arms of someone who truly sees you. There was a time when she believed love was supposed to feel loud. In her 20s, she thought butterflies, long phone calls, jealous fights, and dramatic apologies were proof that someone truly cared. She confused emotional chaos with passion because nobody had ever taught her the difference. Back then, attention felt like love, even when it came with inconsistency, confusion, and pain. But life changes a woman. By the time she reached her 40s, she had already lived through enough heartbreak to understand that real love feels different. It feels calmer, softer, safer. The excitement she once chased had been replaced by something deeper, emotional stability. She no longer wanted someone who made her heart race with uncertainty. She wanted someone who made her nervous system rest. One evening, she sat across from a man who genuinely cared about her, but he couldn't understand why she became emotional over small things. One simple message asking, "Did you get home safe?" made her eyes water. One moment of him remembering her stressful meetings stayed in her mind all day. To him, these were ordinary gestures. To her, they were proof that someone was finally paying attention to her emotionally. That's what emotional attachment becomes after 40. It is no longer built through grand promises or temporary excitement. It grows through consistency, through the small things most people overlook. Because after years of emotional disappointment, a woman starts valuing what feels real over what merely looks romantic. She had spent years in relationships where she gave everything and still felt emotionally alone. She remembers sitting next to someone she loved while feeling invisible. She remembered explaining her pain over and over until eventually she stopped talking altogether. The hardest heartbreak she ever experienced wasn't betrayal. It was realizing she could cry beside someone who claimed to love her, and they still wouldn't truly see her pain. That kind of loneliness changes people. It teaches them to become emotionally careful. It teaches them to stop expecting too much. And eventually they begin protecting their hearts by pretending they need less than they actually do. But the truth is, mature women still crave emotional connection deeply, maybe even more deeply than before. The difference is they no longer crave chaos disguised as love. They crave emotional consistency. They crave peace. They crave someone who makes them feel emotionally chosen every single day, not just when it's convenient. The man sitting across from her that evening noticed something unusual about her. She smiled generally. TLY when he listened carefully. She relaxed when he stayed calm during difficult conversations. She became softer when he reassured her instead of dismissing her feelings. It wasn't because she was too emotional. It was because her heart had spent years surviving emotional neglect, and now even basic emotional care felt healing. Most men never realize how deeply women remember emotional pain. A woman over 40 carries invisible memories into every relationship. She remembers every time she felt unwanted, every moment she questioned her worth because someone failed to love her properly. She remembers giving second chances to people who kept disappointing her. She remembers waiting for texts that never came, sleeping beside emotional distance, and blaming herself for relationships that slowly broke her confidence. And because of that, small acts of emotional care become powerful. A kind tone matters. Patience matters. Presence matters. When a man genuinely listens, follows through on his words and creates emotional safety, he touches parts of her heart that years of pain once closed off. That night, she finally admitted something she had hidden for years. "I don't need perfection anymore," she whispered. "I just need honesty, consistency, and someone who makes me feel emotionally safe." He looked at her differently after that. Not as someone difficult to love, but as someone who had survived enough pain to understand what truly matters. That's the lesson heartbreak eventually teaches people. Real love is not about intensity alone. Intensity fades, attraction changes, life becomes stressful. Bodies age, problems come and go. But emotional attachment built through kindness, trust, and emotional presence becomes stronger over time. And ironically, the older people get, the more they realize that love is often hidden inside the smallest moments. A quiet check-in during a hard day, a hand held during silence, someone remembering the details you thought nobody not. Iced, someone staying emotionally available instead of disappearing whenever things become uncomfortable. She used to think being loved meant hearing beautiful words. Now she understood that being loved meant feeling emotionally safe enough to be fully herself without fear of rejection. That kind of love heals people. Slowly, she stopped performing strength all the time. She stopped pretending she didn't need reassurance. She stopped accepting emotionally unavailable behavior just because someone occasionally showed affection. For the first time in her life, she understood that self-worth is directly connected to the kind of love you allow into your life. And once a woman learns that lesson, everything changes. She no longer chases attention. She chooses peace. She no longer begs people to understand her value. She walks away from those who cannot see it. Because after 40, a woman finally realizes that the deepest emotional attachment is not created by excitement, beauty, or perfect chemistry. It is created by someone who consistently makes her feel emotionally safe, emotionally heard, and emotionally chosen in a world that once made her feel invisible. She used to think love meant staying no matter how much it hurt. In her younger years, she believed loyalty was measured by endurance. If she cried herself to sleep but still stayed, she called it commitment. If she forgave betrayal after betrayal, she called it understanding. If she carried the emotional weight of the relationship alone, she convinced herself that was what strong women did. And for years, she kept choosing people who only loved her halfway. She gave chances to men who admired her body but ignored her emotions. Men who wanted her presence but not her truth. Men who loved her during convenient moments but disappeared emotionally whenever life became difficult. Every relationship left behind invisible scars she pretended didn't exist. By the time she reached her 40s, she had mastered the art of looking okay while falling apart inside. Most people around her never noticed the quiet loneliness she carried. They saw her smile in public, her independence, her strength, her ability to handle life without complaining. But nobody saw the nights she questioned her worth because someone failed to love her properly. Nobody saw how exhausting it became to keep proving she was worthy of effort, honesty, and emotional consistency. One night, after another disappointing argument with someone she loved, she sat alone in her car outside her house for almost an hour. She didn't cry immediately. She just stared at the steering wheel in silence. And in that silence, something inside her finally broke. Not her heart, her illusion. For the first time, she admitted the painful truth to herself. She had spent years asking for the bare minimum from people who were emotionally incapable of giving her what she truly needed. That realization changes a woman, because heartbreak can it. Her destroy your self-worth or force you to rebuild it stronger than before. She remembered all the times she accepted emotional neglect because she feared being alone. All the moments she stayed quiet to avoid conflict. All the nights she lowered her standards just to keep someone from leaving. And suddenly she understood something powerful: loneliness inside a relationship hurts far more than loneliness by yourself. That's the moment self-worth begins. Not when someone finally chooses you, but when you finally choose yourself. The next morning, she looked at herself in the mirror differently. For years, she had searched for validation in other people's attention. She thought being desired meant being valued. But maturity taught her that attraction alone means nothing without emotional responsibility. A person can want your body while slowly destroying your confidence. They can say "I love you" while making you feel emotionally abandoned every single day. And once a woman over 40 understands that, she stops confusing attention with genuine love. That's why many mature women no longer tolerate inconsistency the way they once did. It's not because they became cold or difficult. It's because pain taught them the cost of ignoring red flags. Experience taught them how dangerous it is to stay in relationships where they constantly feel unseen, unheard, or emotionally drained. She began changing slowly after that night, not dramatically, quietly. She stopped begging for communication. She stopped chasing closure from people who never valued her feelings. She stopped over-explaining her worth to emotionally unavailable men. Most importantly, she stopped shrinking herself to make others comfortable. At first, it felt unfamiliar, almost lonely. There's a strange grief that comes with self-respect. Because when you finally start valuing yourself, you also begin losing connections that were built on your lack of boundaries. People who benefited from your emotion. Our weakness suddenly become uncomfortable with your growth, and that's painful. She lost relationships she once thought would last forever. Some people called her too sensitive. Others accused her of changing. But the truth was simpler than that. She was finally healing. Healing changes the way a person loves. Before, she tolerated confusion because she feared abandonment. Now she valued clarity because she finally respected her peace. Before, she accepted inconsistent affection because she thought love required sacrifice. Now she understood that healthy love should not constantly make you question your worth. One evening, she met someone new. He wasn't overly charming. He didn't make dramatic promises. What stood out about him was something much quieter. He listened carefully. He followed through on his words. He remained emotionally present during difficult conversations instead of withdrawing. At first, she almost distrusted his consistency because chaos had become so familiar. Or to her. That's the painful part about surviving heartbreak. For too long, healthy love can feel unfamiliar when you've spent years attached to emotional instability. But slowly, she allowed herself to experience something different. Peace, not perfect love, real love, the kind where she no longer felt anxious waiting for affection, the kind where communication didn't feel like emotional warfare, the kind where she could express pain without being punished for it. And for the first time in years, she realized how beautiful love becomes when self-worth enters the relationship, because self-worth changes everything. It changes the people you allow close to your heart. It changes the way you respond to disrespect. It changes the kind of love you accept. A woman who finally understands her value no longer fights to be chosen by people who cannot love her correctly. She understands that genuine intimacy is not built through obsession, control, or temporary passion. It is built through emotional safety, honesty, patience, and consistency. That lesson usually comes after heartbreak, after betrayal, after disappointment, after years of abandoning yourself for people who would never do the same for you. But once that lesson is learned, a woman becomes unstoppable emotionally, because she no longer loves from desperation. She loves from self-respect. And there is nothing more powerful than a woman who finally realizes she deserves a love that feels safe, honest, and peaceful instead of painful.